see you guys in the dark.
This happened over a year ago, and it still bothers me. I actually made my account just so I can post this, and I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but here it goes. I work in a department store and have had to deal with drunk customers before, staggering around the store, and even trying to start pillow fights with me. But there was this one guy who terrified me. I'll start this by describing myself. I'm around 5'11", kind of chubby, but by no means fat. I'm just a little big and not easily intimidated by most people. My hair is red, but my bangs and 2 streaks of my hair are a green-teal color. On this day in particular, I wasn't wearing a full face of makeup. Honestly, I think all I had time to do was some eyeliner, and I've got the unfortunate baby face. So this guy, I'd say was about 6'2", walks up to me and asks if I can help him. He's got a slight accent, but I can't even place it. Kind of like an English accent, but it was just off a little bit. He's got grayish white hair and a goatee. I'm not great with age guessing, but he was at least old enough to be my dad, if not my grandfather. He's also what I'd describe as husky. A little fat, but overall just generally big, at least twice my size. He's also wearing a thick coat, but it was an unseasonably warm and sunny day without a cloud in sight. He starts asking me about men's clothing, but he's talking under his breath, so it's kind of hard to hear him. So I lean in to hear him a little bit better. I think he's just asking where that department is, so I proceed to point him in the direction of the men's department. Then I hear multiple mumbles, this time about men sounding displeased. I ask, "Oh? If you're looking for young men's, that's in the front of the store." He cut me off mid-sentence, and his whole demeanor changed. He raised his voice. "What? Do I look like a young man to you? What? What are you, like 15? Then I watch as his eyes scan me up and down, almost as though he were checking me out. As if that outburst hadn't even happened, he calmly starts mumbling again, and I can't quite make out what he is saying. All I hear is that he's talking about my hair. It was like he's thinking out loud. But he didn't realize it. Then he clearly says he has to use the restroom, but once he's done, he wants me to help him find a dress shirt, and that he wants it to match my hair. I politely say okay, and give him a fake laugh, and smile, not knowing what else to do. As soon as he turns to walk away, I bolt to the other end of the store. I was panicking already because that encounter was just uncomfortable, so I'm trying to avoid him when a couple asks me for help. So I'm helping this couple, and they, of course, drag me back down to the end of the store where this guy is still waiting. In that time, one of my coworkers had the pleasure of talking to him for a moment, but he told her he didn't need any help, and he was just standing there. So I'm helping the couple still, and I walk right past him. He kind of shouts at me in an angry tone. It was quiet enough, but also too loud to be mistaken for a normal indoor voice. He said something along the lines of, why was I ignoring him even though I had agreed to help him? That's when I noticed his size, and the way he shifted his body as he took a step towards me. I felt like he was threatening me, and knew if he lunged, I couldn't stand a chance. I tell him that I wasn't ignoring him, and that I just was helping someone else. I hand off the item to the couple, and direct my attention to him as he is waiting less than 5 feet behind me. I honestly didn't know what else to do. My body screamed to run, but my head said, if you do something bad, is going to happen. He told me that he already looked at the shirts, and didn't find what he wanted. So when he asked if I will walk him to the front doors, alarm bells are sounding off in my head. I don't want to go too close to the doors with this guy, because who knows if he will grab me and drag me out into a waiting car or something. My heart was racing, but then I thought, my manager is in the front of the store at the jewelry counter, and if I walk the guy to there, I'll still be safe. He will be able to see the exit from there, but he won't be close enough to be able to kidnap me easily. So I walk up with him, and we are walking next to the bras, and the aisles are kind of small. I realize that he keeps trying to walk next to me, but the aisles are way too small for him to walk next to me without us touching. So we are weaving in and out of the fixtures in the center aisle, me trying to avoid him, and him trying to stand next to me. He then starts to laugh. He mumbles some more, something about it being funny that we are weaving in and out of the braziers. I'm thinking that this is not funny at all. He proceeds to ask me why I dyed my hair. I look at him and say, I don't know, because I felt like it, I guess. Then he asks me how old I think he is. I reply with an I don't know. Then he asks me again about 5 seconds later. I repeat that I don't know, and he doesn't even tell me how old he is, and he tries to ask me personal questions. He asks me my middle name. I pause. The look he gave me was of pure frustration, so I gave him my middle name, which I could say I used a different name, but I didn't. I panicked, but I sure as hell wasn't giving this guy my last name. My middle name is pretty common anyways. He repeated my first and middle name back. He knew my first name because of my name tag, of course. I shuddered. My mom says it when she's mad, but I'm saying it actually scared me even worse. We finally reached the front of the store. He asked me to take off my glasses. I slipped them down for a second, not even uncovering my eyes, and pushed them back up real quick. Honestly, I wasn't sure what to do. My training never covered this sort of a situation. I was terrified of what he might do, so I should refuse him. My instinct was telling me to oblige, so as long as what he asked was somewhat harmless. After I did what he says, yes, your eyes are as beautiful as I thought they'd be. I'm confused. Is he hitting on me? Didn't he just say that I looked 15? What the fuck is going on? We get to the front of the store, and he asks me if I know why he wanted to walk him to the front. I honestly tell him that I don't know. He starts giggling to himself like a schoolgirl. If you've ever heard a grown man giggle, let me just tell you, it's very unsettling. He says, oh, you probably just think that I'm a crazy old man. In my head, I'm screaming, yes, now get the fuck away from me. But I feel if I say yes, he is going to hurt me. Then he says, I wanted you to walk me to the front because I just wanted to spend a little more time with you. I'm standing there like I don't even know this guy. This guy doesn't even know me. Why does he want to spend more time with me? I just want to get away from him. My manager walks by, and I shoot her the most horrified look. She just smiles and waves completely oblivious. Then he follows that up with, sometimes the Lord just brings people together. Not us. Nope. Screw that. He reaches into his jacket and grabs hold of something. Then he quickly adds, and sometimes he takes them away. He still had a hold of whatever was in his jacket. My heart sinks, and I'm thinking, this is it. He's got a knife, or maybe even a gun. He's gonna murder me in this store right now. He's gonna murder me and drag my body out and stuff it in his trunk. He follows that up with, you probably just think that I'm a crazy old man. I pause to think on that, and I respond with a seemingly thought-out, no, not really. He then lets go of whatever he had a hold of in his coat and draws his hand back out. He looks at me intently, then after several seconds of awkward staring, says, now, I'm gonna go leave, and probably never see you again. I'm like, thank God. He turns to leave, but whips his head back around. But if I do happen to come back, his voice deepens a little bit, don't call security on me. And as soon as he turned around to walk out the door, I ran to the loss prevention office to hide. Loss prevention is the closest thing we have to security around here. My legs felt like jello, but I kept moving as if my life depended on it. I was then escorted to the back of the store to wait until they could confirm that he was indeed gone from the store. I waited for about a half an hour before I went back out to finish my shift. When my shift ended, I waited around half an hour more so that I would be able to walk out with someone. The woman that I walked out with also had encountered him by the register while I was hiding on the other end of the store. She proceeded to tell me that she thinks he was drunk. I am still currently working at that same place, and I haven't seen him since. I really hope that I never see him again. This was about 6 to 7 years ago, when I was 17. I worked as a soft line, which is clothing, sales associate, at a large chain department store. My job was to walk around the floor and essentially keep everything organized. I would fold clothes, clean out the fitting rooms, put items that had been returned back into the right place, and help out any customers who needed it. Generally, I liked my job. It was easy, and all the girls I worked with were around my age and really cool. One of my least favorite parts of the job was answering phone calls. The customer service desk would put relevant calls through on the phone in the appropriate department, for example, women's or kids' departments. And whoever was assigned to that area for their shift would answer it. These calls usually consisted of speaking to an employee from another store location about finding an item and putting it on hold for a customer, or speaking to a customer directly about whether or not we had an item that they were looking for. It wouldn't have been so bad if the phones were cordless, but they were not. I have too many memories of having to run back and forth between the phone and the rest of the store as I looked for whatever the person on the other end wanted. I digress. One particular summer day, I remember because my uniform was khakis and a hideous green polo year-round, so I was sweating my ass off. There was a call for the kids' department. I made my way over to the phone and took the call. It was a man speaking in a low voice, as if he was trying to be quiet. The conversation went something like this. Hi, do you have any socks? Slightly annoyed because this is a clothing store. Obviously, we have socks. Yes, we do. How big are they? Do you mean like what size? The kids' socks are sized just like shoes are. So we have socks that fit a range of sizes, like 4 to 6, and so on. Yeah, but like, how big are they about? Very annoyed now because what the fuck does he want from me? I don't know how to answer you. What size shoe does the kid that you're shopping for wear? Oh, I'm using them for something else. It's, an experiment. That's the last part of the conversation that I really remember. It was at that point that I was creeped out by more than just his voice, because he just sounded like a weirdo. I don't remember how the call ended. I know for sure I maintained my professionalism and found a way out of it, because I can't remember telling the girl I was working with at the time. I ended up telling most of the girls who worked in soft lines with me, because, all creepiness aside, I found it genuinely hilarious. It might be worth mentioning once again that all of us who worked in the clothing department in this store were high school-aged girls. It didn't take super long for one of my colleagues to get a similar phone call. We happened to be working together, and she seemed to come tell me about the weird phone call that she just had. We compared our experiences and decided at this point that we should tell a manager, since it apparently wasn't a one-off thing. The manager at the time was a woman around my mother's age, who also happened to have daughters in high school. I was relieved when she looked disturbed as we recounted our stories, and told us to come get her if the call should come back. If you guessed, he did indeed call back. You get a cookie. The next few times he called, the same colleague got him, and she said the conversation always started with him asking for socks, and becoming progressively more creepy. He would always ask really specific details about how big the socks were and what colors we had. When asked anything about what he needed for them, he always gave some vague, creepy answer like, an experiment. The way she described it, he seemed to be escalating from his first few calls. It seemed like he would ask more questions, or be breathing more loudly as he called back more often. What bothers me the most about this now, though, is that it always had to be kids' socks. He always called the kids' department, and he always confirmed he was looking for kids' socks when asked if he would rather be put through to the men's department. The next time I got the call, I tried to be subtle about the fact that I was getting a manager. I think that someone else had the mistake of saying something like, "Hold on, let me ask my manager." And by the time the manager got the call, he had already hung up. As soon as I heard, "Do you have any socks?" I fought the urge to vomit as I tried to be casual. After he asked his inevitable, weirdly specific questions about the sock sizes, I told him that I had to place him on hold so that I can go check. Of course, I bolted for the manager's office at the back of the store, probably looking like a lunatic. My manager dropped what she was doing to come back to the phone with me and take the call. The dude was still on the line when she picked up the phone, but as soon as she introduced herself and asked how she could help, he hung up. I didn't hear anything about him calling again after that, and I sincerely hope he got scared enough to knock it off. More likely, though, he just started calling somewhere else. This may not seem that creepy. At the time, I thought it was relatively harmless. But I've since heard similar stories about weird calls to retail workers, which prompted me to share this here. So, dude with the weird affinity to children's socks, please stop calling my store. I'm tired of dealing with you. To start things off, this incident occurred in a small town community, where it's not really crime-ridden or exactly dangerous. Around this time last year, I was working full-time at a little Japanese retailer shop at the mall near my house. My schedule fluctuated, but the majority of my shifts were closing shifts. I preferred this because it gave me enough time to sleep in, make myself a lunch, catch the bus, get to the mall a bit earlier to buy snacks and a drink before I began my dreaded 8.5-hour shift. On one particular day, as I was getting ready to walk to the bus stop, I saw a big commotion going on right across from my house. At the town hall, I crossed the street right in time before several other police cars and an ambulance rushed by. Sirens wailing so loud, I'm sure the entire neighborhood heard them. I was wondering what was going on, but quickly disregarded it. As I got on the first bus nearby my house, I got off at the intersection where I'm supposed to take a second bus. That leads me straight to the terminal across the mall. While I was waiting at the shelter, I see a guy around my age in his 20s, staring right at me, with eyes so black and empty. Mind you, there was no one else around, besides the two of us. I remember thinking to myself that it seemed odd he was wearing a sweater with a heavy-looking backpack and construction boots, both of which looked oversized for his tall, slim figure, but it was blazing hot outside. Not even for a split second did he once tear his gaze away from me. Then it quickly hit me that I recognize him as a regular customer that frequently comes in to buy earphones at the store that I work at. Now, I usually try to keep to myself, but for some reason, I've been told I draw all kinds of people to me with my friendly, positive aura. I felt the need to pretend that I was on the phone to avoid any sort of conversation. He then proceeded to take a seat beside me, still gazing at me, and mustered a "hi" before going on that he recognized me from work, and if I was going there right now. When the bus finally arrived, we got on, and he took a seat next to me. We had small talk about random stuff and our hobbies. He went on to tell me about his broken relationship with his parents, where he ended up getting kicked out. I assumed he was homeless at first, but he kind of confirmed it subtly when he told me that he's been on couch surfing between friends' houses. We finally reached the bus terminal that's across the mall. He ended up walking me to my work. I didn't ask him to, before going off on his own way. Right before departing, he asked for my number, which I stupidly gave him, and told me, if you ever want to just chill or smoke with me, text me. After conversing with him, I shrugged off any preconceived judgment I had of him earlier of being creepy, for just a guy that's socially awkward and perma-fried. He ended up texting me later on that night, asking to hang out, but I cut the conversation short, telling him I was tired and also had to work the next day. I never heard from him again. Now here is where things get interesting. After a few days, and then weeks, news reports were coming out that there was a violent sexual assault that occurred right where the trails were across from my house. Near the town hall, the victim was a teenage girl who was going for a walk when she was struck with an unknown object by the suspect. He happened to be armed with a gun and proceeded to sexually assault her before leaving the scene. It took about a week for the police to find the suspect. The investigation was ongoing. It shook up the entire community. Nothing like this has happened before. It's fairly peaceful and close-knit. It's scary because it happened right in broad daylight. So when police released the images of the suspect, with his name, following his arrest, I damn near had a heart attack. It was him. The same guy who I met at the bus stop, who walked me to my work, who asked for my number, who was texting me throughout the day. After committing the crime, he had the same dark black eyes, long hair, and wearing the exact sweater, backpack, and shoes. I started looking at past news reports to compare the dates and times to when he texted me, and they all matched up. Needless to say, my intuition about people are on and off, and that I should learn to trust it more often. I felt a bit of guilt hoping I could have done something earlier, but there was no way for me to know until after. This summer, I had the joy of working as a plant vendor at a popular home improvement store. I just completed my first year of college, and I am a female. The store I rep in is a kind of sketchy town area of my city, so I have met my fair share of creepers and pervs. As a plant vendor, my responsibilities are to take care of delivery, like removing plants from racks, putting them on tables in a presentable manner, move shrubs, price items according to advertisements, and help customers from time to time. My uniform consists of shorts, a t-shirt, sneakers, and on occasion a hat. Usually you wear whatever is weather appropriate. On a typical day, like hot weather, a guy probably in his late 40s to early 50s comes in with his elderly mom. This guy looks a little ragged, but was nice when he came up and asked for help, so I obliged. Before I waited on him, I had been taking care of a delivery, and had been bending down to get a tray of plants out to put on the table. He asked me a question, so I showed him where to find what he was looking for. After we were out of earshot of his mother, he proceeded to tell her what a nice ass I have for a little white girl. I'm about 5'3". Fuck me, right? I decided to be polite, ignore his comment, and go back to my delivery. He checks out and pulls his car up to the front of the garden department where I was working, because the associates were loading his car with mulch. He then gets out of his car, walks over to me. I pretty much give him a "what do you want now" look. And he just says, "My ex-wife was always hounding me about me wandering my eyes, but I just can't help myself." Luckily, someone got paged on the intercom who has the same name or similar sounding name as me, so I just fled to the indoors. In another instance, I was hit on by an associate. This dude was 43 and still hitting the clubs up in our city like he was 21. Every time we worked together, he would insist that I was no fun and that I should go out to the clubs with him so that he could show me a good time. That creeper got fired because of my complaint and complaints from other female associates. Needless to say, next summer, I would like to get an internship and not work retail for once. When I was 18, I worked my first retail job at the mall where I grew up. Our dressing rooms were locked, and we had 2 keys on lanyards to unlock them. I usually worked closing shifts, which is about 5 to 9, but this day I was covering for one of my managers, so I got off around 5 p.m. I was just about to walk out the main entrance of the mall when I realized I still had one of the dressing room keys around my neck, so I turned around to go take it back. There were a few stores in between where I worked and that entrance, as well as some kiosks and one of those indoor playground things for the kids. You know, the roped-off areas with big rubber things for kids to climb on. This was a relatively busy mall, so it was always full of kids, especially on weekends, and very loud. As I was walking back to my store, I noticed a guy in a gray sweatsuit who I had been seeing doing laps around the mall earlier in the day. There were always mall walkers, so I didn't really pay him any mind. This time, though, he was walking more slowly, with his eyes on the playground. There was something off about the way that he was walking, and I didn't figure out what was going on until he turned his body slightly, and I saw what he was doing. He had his hand down his pants and was jerking off while walking. He didn't take his eyes off of the playground. I immediately stopped walking, and I felt sick to my stomach. I had no idea what to do. After taking a moment to make sure I was really seeing what I thought I was seeing, I just started running and didn't stop until I got back to my store. My store manager was at the register and could tell by the look on my face that something was up. I tried to tell her what happened as quickly as possible, and without saying anything, she picked up the phone and called mall security. I went with 2 of the security guards to point out who he was to them, and then they told me to just go home. My manager texted me to keep me updated. By the time that they'd found him, he was finished. Thanks, I hate it. And for some reason, there were no cameras pointed at the kids' area, so they couldn't really do anything about it because they had no proof that it had actually happened. I have no doubt in my mind about what I saw, and I know that the mall security have a bunch of bullshit rules they have to follow to keep the mall safe from any lawsuits, but that still made me pretty mad. They just followed him around the mall until he left to make sure that he didn't do anything else. According to them, he just got an ice cream cone, ate it by himself in the food court, and then left. That mall had a lot of weird shit happen. I heard several horrifying stories from mall security on slow nights, but that was the only time I ever witnessed something so terrible there. I have no idea how no one else noticed what was going on. 4 years later, I still have this guy's face burned into my brain. Hopefully I never run into him ever again. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.